Hello everyone, welcome to the Academy of Civil Services. My name is Abhigyan and welcome to my class. Today we will be talking about the last class of ancient history, and today we will talk about two very important topics that will help you not only for your APSC examinations but also for your UPSC examinations. Okay, so look at me, we have two different topics for today's class. One is a very small topic which will wrap up very quickly, but the next topic will be quite big and it will require some amount of imagination. You have to draw on your own, you have to make your own notes, you have to probably even look for images online, especially on Google Images, so that you get better at retaining the memory. So two things we have to learn today. The first one will be the great king Harsha Gardener and his times. So in the first part we will talk about the great king Harsha Gardener and his times. We'll talk about who was his ministers, how was his administration, why was he important for our syllabus, especially for the Assam history and the Indian history part, especially for the students from Assam. Why is he important? Okay, so we will talk about that, even though we did discuss the entire history of Harsha Gardener and his special relevance to the Assam Kamarupa kingdom in our Assam history class, especially in the beginning of the Assam history class. So we won't go into much details, but we'll just brush up the basic things so that you get the fair idea of what is happening. Okay, so small part of Harsha Gardener, we'll discuss about it, and then we'll move on to the main chapter of today's class, and that will be about the different types of temples which have been built by the great kings and the queens in ancient India. Okay, so we'll talk about in great details about the different types of temples, how different they were geographically, where were they located, the important temples, the representative temples. Okay, so we are not going to discuss every temple which is there in India right now because we have thousands of temples, but we will discuss about the main temples which you will get in any history book, basic history book, and which will help you in writing and marking the right answers for your examination. Okay, so let's begin with the first topic, Harsha Gardener and his times. Okay, Harsha Alright, so being students of Assam, we look at Harsha Gardener from a very different lens, okay? Being students from Assam, being familiar with Assamese history, we look at Harsha Gardener from a very different angle. And that angle is that Harsha Gardener had a very interesting and meaningful political alliance with the great king Bhaskar Burman of Assam, or in other words of Kamarupa, because Assam was not exactly called Assam at that point of time, it was known as Kamarupa. Okay, so Assam actually is a much later form of the word which was used to describe our place, but back in those days, like in the 6th century and the 7th century AD, the eastern part of India was actually known as Kamarupa kingdom. Okay, so the reason why we have a special place for learning the history of Harsha Gardener is because of our Bhaskar Burman's political alliance with Harsha Gardener and what those were the consequences of that political alliance. Okay, so that is why we are more interested in this particular topic. But apart from that, we also need to know a few facts about Harsha Gardener. Okay, so because we need to answer questions as well. So let's just start with the first thing. When was he born? So he was born in 590 AD. So you can see that 590 age towards the later part of the Gupta age. So the great Gupta rulers like Chandragupta and all, they had already died, and the Hunas had already attacked the kingdom of India, and the Gupta power was slowly coming down, and the trade was also slowly reducing in India, which gave rise to the particular circumstances which defined the times of Harsha Gardener. Okay, so when you imagine Harsha Gardener, you have to imagine how it was different from the great glory which was achieved during the times of the Gupta emperors, and especially Chandragupta part 2. Okay, so and how was it different? The difference is that most importantly, the trade which was the epitome, which was the most focused feature of the Gupta Empire, it slowly came down. Okay, so the trade not only in the domestic sphere but also in the international sphere, for example, the Roman trade, that came down during the times of Harshavardhana. Okay, now don't ask me why it came down. There are so many reasons, and we will discuss about it. But remember, there is very important consequence of the trade coming down, and that is the Roman coins which used to come back to India when we were trying to export our goods from here. Those Roman coins were slowly not coming back, because the people from Rome, because of the lowering of trade, they were not buying the spices, the silk, the satin, the indigo, and whatever else were the items of export. They were slowly less bought by the people of Rome, which is why we had less gold coins, which is why the ministers and the emperors of Harshavardhana's time, they had less money to pay the officials, which is why we say that the whole trend of granting land to the ministers and to officials, and especially to Brahmins, the whole trend of granting land to this important bunch of people became quite significant and established during the times of Harshavardhana. Now that is a very significant point which we'll touch on later on, okay, because that marks the beginning of the medieval age. Okay, listen to my argument once again. The beginning of the land grant system, which was actually done by the Satavahanas way back, but the great proliferation and the establishment of this system of granting land to important officers and important Brahmins, that whole trend sort of changed the entire agricultural economy, the entire trade and commerce system, the social system, and that gave rise to a unique form of system which we will know is the feudal system, okay, which is based on the feudal system, and people working in big farms, people holding land, becoming the political superiors, the small rulers who were ruling in different parts. They became landholders, they became owners of standing armies, and they became very politically powerful. Okay, so the point is, Harshavardhana's time signified a very important time in our timeline from ancient to medieval period, and we say that it is here that the whole root of the transformation to the medieval age, or the transformation to the feudal age, started from Harshavardhana's time. Okay, so that's a bit of a conceptual clarification that might help you in understanding this topic. But let's go back to the facts. 590 AD is when he was born, and his father's name was King Prabhakara Vardhana. Okay, so Harshavardhana's father's name was Prabhakara Vardhana, and he belonged to the Vardhana dynasty. All right, so that's how that's what his ancestors were. Then he belonged to the Vardhana dynasty. So, and that was also known as Pushyabhuti. He was also a great follower of the Mahayana form of Buddhism. Okay, so Mahayana form of Buddhism. So that is very interesting, because we know that Buddhism by this time had sort of reduced in popularity. In fact, even during the times of the Gupta period, it was the Brahmanical form of religion and the Bhagavatism, that was gaining in popularity. Vaishnavism was gaining in popularity, but Buddhism was not as popular at that point of time, and there were so many rulers who were trying to oppress the Buddhists at that point of time. So the whole high popularity of Buddhism, which was achieved during the pre-Mauryan and the Mauryan age, during the times of Ashoka, that sort of came down later on, and it was also coming down during the times of the Gupta period. And this was after the Gupta period, and Buddhism was not as popular. Okay, so that is interesting, because that makes Harshavardhana quite staunch in his beliefs, and he was a hardcore follower of the Mahayana form of Buddhism. This is also very relevant because we know that there was a very important traveler who came during Harshavardhana's time to India from China. Do you know who that was? Of course, his name is, we colloquially, his name is Huensang. Huensang. So this spelling is not exactly followed by nowadays, but then This is how it is found in most of the basic history books like Arashama. Okay, so Huensang is the traveler who came to China, and he was a Buddhist scholar. Okay, so he came because he wanted to get some scriptures from India at the point of time, and the whole great University of Nalanda, which we had mentioned in our last class, and we had said that the great Kumaragupta, the one before Skandagupta, he was the one who inaugurated the Nalanda University. And by the time of Harshavardhana, Nalanda was quite popular at that point of time, with thousands of students, so many professors, students, global, international students. There were hostels. Okay, so there were lectures on Buddhism, Theravada was a form of Buddhism, then Mahayana form of Buddhism, and then later on even Vajrayana form of Buddhism. So one of those travelers who came all the way from China was Huensang, and Shilabhadra was the vice chancellor or the principal of the university at that point of time, and he was supposed to be quite a strict fellow. Okay, so of course, because he was the head of the institution, and Shilabhadra was an expert in something which is known as Yogachara. Okay, so Huensang, the reason why he came to India was definitely because he wanted to get some Buddhist scriptures. He wanted to explore how Buddhism looks like, how it was in the land of its origin, and we are really proud of that. So, but at the same time, there was this guy known as Shilabhadra, who was the principal of the Nalanda University. Okay, so you can use the word principal or the head or the vice chancellor or anything, but then he was the one who was controlling and supervising the university in general, and he was a master of this particular form of yoga, and that was known as Yogacharya. Okay, so this was a particular form of yoga which was more stressing more on the physical elements of the whole meditation system, and that particular breed of the system of belief was a form of interest for Huensang, and he came here and he said in his own writings that the master Shilabhadra himself had adopted me, and now he was responsible for teaching me Yogachara, and I had a really great time in the Nalanda University. So he goes on to write about how the hostels were, what were the views from the windows, what were the subjects which were taught, and how there were some seniors which used to stay at the gates, and they used to ask questions for the students. Only if you are able to answer the questions, you are able to enter. Okay, so these are not that necessary for our class, but then just remember Huensang came and Shilabhadra was the principal at that point of time. So this is just some facts about Harshavardhana. Another interesting fact about Harshavardhana is that he was inaugurated for the throne in the year 606 AD, 606 AD, when he was 16 years of age. So remember, he was not even an adult at that point of time, according to modern whatever rules we have. He was not even 18, but then he had to become a king at that point of time in 606 AD because of a very specific reason, and that is what I'm going to tell you right now. So what happened was that there was Harshavardhana's sister was getting married to a particular empire, small empire, and then her husband was killed, and because of that Harshavardhana's elder brother, whose name was Rajyavardhana, so Harshavardhana's elder brother, whose name was Rajyavardhana, he said that, okay, I am going to take revenge of his Harshavardhana's sister's the whole crime, and then he said that okay, I'm gonna fight the enemy, and the enemy was Sashanka of Goda. Okay, we will talk about it even for the whole alliance. So Sashanka of Goda was responsible for killing Rajyavardhana, who was Harshavardhana's elder brother. Okay, so naturally, because the brother was killed in the battle, and because an injustice was done to his family, so Harshavardhana was not happy about it, and he said that, okay, I'm going to take revenge. And it is because of this particular political circumstance where he had to avenge the death of his own elder brother, and where he had to sort of seek justice for his own family, that he had to form an alliance with Bhaskar Burman of Assam. Okay, so Bhaskar Burman of Assam and Harshavardhana of Kannauj. They formed a political alliance because they wanted to get rid of a common enemy, and his name was Sashanka of Gauda, and that is how the whole trouble started. Okay, and eventually both the alliance, they were able to defeat Sashanka of Gauda, because they were two very powerful rulers, and they were attacking from both the sides. So Kannauj was towards the west, and Kannauj was towards the west, and Kamrupa was towards the east, and in between, in Bengal, that particular region, you have Gauda, and where Sashanka was ruling from. And then because of the attack from both the sides, he had to flee from his kingdom, and most parts of eastern Assam, most parts of eastern Bengal, and those Bengal region was actually occupied by the forces of Harshavardhana. Okay, so that's some of the facts about Harshavardhana. So he was a king at 16 years of age. Then he forged an alliance with Bhaskar Barman, which we had already talked about. He shifted his capital from Thanesar to Kannauj. Okay, so initially his capital was in a region known as Thanesar, which is in Haryana. So he shifted his capital from Thanesar to Kannauj. Okay, so Kannauj is more towards the eastern part, it's in UP. So he shifted his capital from Thanesar to Kannauj. Okay, alright, so these are some of the facts. So after shifting his capital to Kannauj, he became even more powerful. He tried to grab more territories. But apart from that, he also defeated the Vallavi king of Gujarat. Okay, he defeated the Vallavi king of Gujarat. Alright. So these are some of the political facts, but one more fact about the inscription, which is a common topic, which is always, if not in APSC, in UPSC, they always ask this kind of question. So this is about the inscription, which talks about the defeat of Harshavardhana. Even though he was a great king, even though he had a lot of political conquests, and he had great generals and a centralized administration, but still he did get defeated a few times, and one of those times was written down in this particular inscription. So this inscription talks about how the Chalukya king Pulakeshin II defeated Harshavardhana. Okay, so let's think about the inscription. The inscription is known as the Eye Hole. It's not EYE, it is AIHOLE, so that's how you would pronounce it. So Eye Hole inscription, it's in Karnataka right now, and the whole place of Eye Hole and Badami, these places, and Pattadakal, all these places. So Eye Hole is in Karnataka right now, and the reason why we talk about Eye Hole is because that particular place of western, northern and central Karnataka was the place where the Chalukyas used to rule, and they had a lot of architectural elements from that place, and the whole different kinds of temples which we find from Eye Hole are basically discussed under the Chalukya of Badami architecture, that particular topic. But then, because there was a Chalukya king whose name was Pulakeshin II. Pulakeshin II, he was defeated by, Pulakeshin II defeated Harshavardhana, and that whole defeat, the whole process of defeat was written down in the Eye Hole inscription. Okay, so that's something very important. So that kind of reduced and dashed the hopes of Harshavardhana for whatever his southern ambitions were. Alright. So many inscriptions were found at Eye Hole, but this particular Eye Hole inscription is found at this temple of Meguti. So it's found in the Meguti temple. So they might ask you which temple do we find this whole Eye Hole inscription, which talks about the defeat of Harshavardhana at the hands of Pulakeshin II. Alright. So, and the inscription itself is written in Sanskrit, but it was written in the Kannada script. Okay, so because as I said, the whole reason is Karnataka, so Kannada was the script which was being used, but the language which was used was chaste Sanskrit. Alright, so those are some of the facts. You can write down the dates as well. It's from 1618 to 618 to 619 AD. Okay, so He came to the throne in 606, and when he was around 28, 29, he had his defeat with Pulakeshin. All right. So there were two types of territories which were being ruled by Harshavardhana. So one of them were the direct territories, and the others were the indirect territories. Of course, in any case of a great empire, you will know that there will be some territories which will be directly controlled by the king, but then there will be some territories which are maybe in not so important place, or maybe he might have a different prince or a vassal state who is ruling that particular territory. And for the case of Harshavardhana, the direct territories were mostly the central part of India, like the central provinces, then Bengal, then Kalinga, then Rajputana and Gujarat. Okay, so the central part of India, including Bengal and western Gujarat, were directly ruled by Harshavardhana. On the other hand, the indirect territories which were ruled indirectly by Harshavardhana were mostly more western part like Jalandhar, then Kashmir, then of course Kamrupa was there because Bhaskar Barman, when he came into a political alliance with Harshavardhana, of course Harshavardhana will definitely have an indirect influence about how Bhaskar Barman will be conducting the affairs of Kamrupa kingdom, right? So he had an indirect control over the Kamrupa kingdom as well at that point of time. But apart from the Kamrupa kingdom, there were places like Punjab, and then even Nepal on the north was indirectly controlled by Harshavardhana. Okay, so now we have not only talked about what were his victories and his defeats, but we have also talked about how large was his empire and which are the territories which were directly and which were indirectly, controlled by this particular king. So we have also talked about Huensang. So the guy Huensang, he wrote this whole social, political, cultural, whatever events were happening, whatever his ideas were, whatever he thought about what was happening in the kingdom of Harshavardhana, he wrote that in the form of a book, and that book was known as Siyuki. Okay, so that book was known as Siyuki. So the book which was written by Huensang, that book was known as Siyuki. Okay. So that's how you would write it. Siyuki was the book which was written by Huensang. Okay, it describes how life was during the times of Harshavardhana. Then the court poet of Harshavardhana was this person, amazing person who's known as Banabhatta. So he was all praises and eulogies for the king. So he said the king was great, he was very courageous, he was physically very fit, and he was also very kind-hearted for the normal people. All right, so Banabhatta was the court poet, and the book that he wrote was known as Harsha Charita. Okay, so of course, because it's talking about Harshavardhana, so it was known as Harsha Charita. So who wrote Harsha Charita? It was the court poet, and his name was Banabhatta. All right. So that gives an account of Harsha's life and whatever morals and the rules that he followed in his day-to-day life. All right. Okay. So Harsha was not only very courageous and was fighting all the time, but also he was a kind-hearted person, and that we know because he made a lot of land grants and capital grants, and money and services were donated to the Nalanda University, which is why Nalanda was quite proliferating at that point of time. And Harshavardhana realized that if he has to increase the reaches of his power, if he has to establish himself and become immortal, he has to give some amount of money to Nalanda, whether in the form of money or in the form of land or services or officials, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that he was also involved in education, higher education, arts and culture. All right. So these are some of the things. The taxes that were received from the people were 1/4. So that is quite interesting. Usually it is always 1/6. So the taxes which were taken was 1/4 of the produce was taken. And the taxes were not only used for the military purposes, but they were also used for peacemaking purposes and cultural development, whatever efforts that Harshavardhana took at that point of time. Okay, so these are some of the things of Harshavardhana. Now that brings us to the end of the first topic. We said we will discuss 2 topics today, and let's go and find out what the next topic is. Yes, now we have to use our imagination a bit more, because now we will become architects. I'm not sure how many of you are architects, but I'm sure I'm not. But then, because we're trying to become civil service officers, we are expected to know everything under the sun. Right now we're learning history, and then we have to learn arch and architecture as well. In fact, that particular word architecture is there in your syllabus. GS paper 1 for UPSC. So they have specifically mentioned that you have to know about the literature, the culture, the art, but as well as the architecture, which talks about what was built, the real physical structures which we have inherited from our past. Okay, so so it is fine. I mean, it makes sense that since we are in India, we need to know what are the different types of structures which we have inherited from thousands of years. And the structures from ancient India are even more important, because you do not realize how valuable these things are. Because if we see any building right now in Assam, we have probably seen the oldest one will probably be around 100 years old, 150 years old. Basically, I'm talking about the houses which belong to the colonial period. But then there are structures which are found in India, especially the temples, which have been constructed thousands of years back by using thousands of people, and by tens of years, and spending huge amount of money, and which are still quite fascinating and awe-inspiring. Okay, if you go and stand beside the whole show temple of Mahabalipuram, you would realize what I'm talking about. I mean, when you stand there, when you can see the grandiosity, okay, when you see how big the walls are, and the intricate details of the sculpture which were made by, I don't know who the sculptors were, because we don't know their names. So you realize that we do have a very rich history behind our back. Okay, now the reason why I'm just talking about this is because since we are trying to learn art and architecture, and since we are going to talk about a very specific and specialized topic about temples, it is very important for you to consider looking at images online, okay? Images of the temples that I will be talking about right now, so that even if you haven't been to those temples, you can see how they look, what their textures are, how big are the walls, how many walls are there, how is the entrance, how large are the pillars, what are the images which are found inside, whether it is a Shiva, whether it is a Nandi, whether it is a Vishnu. And so these are some of the things. Okay, I mean, you can read from the material, you can read hundreds of lines, but because these are quite structural objects, and because you have to answer questions in your paper, you need to retain the memories inside your brain, and rote learning will not help in this particular thing. Even if you keep repeating it, once if you look at the image and you keep looking at the image while you are trying to read the lines of our notes, that is how you will be able to keep those things in your brain. And let's say you're sitting for the prelims examination and you see a particular question, and immediately you see the options, and that particular picture will come to your brain, and you will know the answer. You will at least know what are the options which can be eliminated. Okay, so the thing is, 2 things. One, you have to look at images online, and the second thing, you have to try and repeat the information again and again. All right, so saying that, let's start off with the whole temple architecture. Okay, temple architecture. All right, so after this class, you will be able to master this particular topic. I guarantee you that. We will come to know about the different types of temples, the 3 types of temples which are found in India on a stylistic basis, the types of temples which are found in the 4 corners of India, east, west, north and south, and also the different examples of those temples. Okay, suppose we're talking about a particular style of temples which are found in northern India, then we will also talk about what are the examples, the primary representative examples of those temples, so that whenever you get at a question, whether it is your mains examination or your prelims, you will be able to also give examples. Okay, now examples are going to get you more marks, because you can write about any particular temple or any style, but then if you don't know the example of the temple, oh my god, that will not give you marks. So we will learn that right now, temple architecture. And why are we learning about the temples? Because temples are places which are recognized by society. They hold extremely important societal, economic and religious value in our Hindu and the whole syncretic society that we have in India right now and even in the past. So temples were important also because those temples were visited by a huge number of people at that point of time. Okay, almost everyone, starting from a child to old man, used to come to the temples. They used to take part in the activities which were organized by the temples, even though they could not become priests, even though the common people could not hope to become a priest, because the Brahmins were the only people mostly which were recognized as priests. But still, normal people did come and take part in different types of activities in those temples, whether in the form of drama or a cultural event or dance or singing or whatever. Okay, so even when they had to sort of, let's say, give a punishment to someone, or something wrong, something big is happening in the particular village, and people need to come together and arrive at a consensus, they were generally choosing the compounds of the temple, because the whole idea of the temple itself was respected and it was intimidating for the normal people. Alright, so with that information, let's talk about what are the different types of temples that we will talk about. We will talk about basically 3 different types of temples right now. Okay, let me write them down. The first one will be the Nagara style of temple, and the second one will be the Dravida style of temple, and the third one will be the Vesara style of temple. Okay, so these are the 3 types of temple. Now, from just the 3 names, it might not be clear what they signify, but Nagara style of temple are on the basis of North Indian temples. Okay, so these are code names. These are code names for a particular type of temple. So Nagara is North Indian temples. Dravida, as you know, belongs to South India. So Dravida style of temples, they represent the temples which are found in South India. Okay, and this particular small fellow out here, slightly on the corner, this one is something more independent, but it does have a mixture of both these styles. So it has a mixture of both the North Indian and the South Indian styles. So it's a mix, and it is also independent. So what I mean is that they will have their own elements in the Vesara style, but at the same time they will also have some very important elements from these 2 styles. Okay, so makes sense, right? It's very logical. So one is North, one is South, and one is a mixture of both these styles. Alright, now this is the basic definition of the temple, okay, of the types of temple. Then we are also going to divide the temples based on their location. We will talk about the temples which are found in the North India, and that will be under the Nagara style of temples. Then we'll talk about the South Indian temples. We'll also touch a bit about the Vesara. Then we'll talk about the temples which are found in Eastern India, like in Bengal, like in Assam, okay, like in Orissa. And then we'll also talk about the temples which are found in the Western India, like in Gujarat, like in Rajasthan, okay, temples like Dilwara temple or Mount Abu, okay. And then we'll talk about the topmost part, Kashmir as well. Okay, so let's just start learning about the basics of a temple, okay. So bear with me. So I have to make a diagram right now. So let me just quickly make the diagram for you. Alright, so we are trying to draw a basic structure of a temple. It doesn't have to be on scale, and I'm not an architect. So the reason why I'm drawing it is because you will see a few names which has come up Pradakshina Patha, you already know that actually means the circumambulatory path. Okay, so Pradakshina Patha, you have learnt about it when we were talking about the Mauryan art and architecture and we were discussing the stupa system. So it's nothing but a circular pathway which revolves the entrance. Okay, so it revolves the DT as well, so the people will go around the path and that's how they will be praying. So that's a circular path which is used by the people to pray to the deity. Alright, so that's the Pradakshina Patha. This is the big thing, this is the platform on which the whole structural temple is built, and that platform is a very simple word that is known as Jagati. Okay, now another very important word will be Shikhara. Okay, Shikhara is nothing but a tall spire, like a big long structure. Okay, so now we are actually trying to see how a temple of the North Indian or the Nagara style of temple, how it looks. And the most important basic feature of a Nagara style of temple is nothing but the Shikhara, and the Shikhara is like a curvilinear structure. Okay, so this exactly is a Shikhara out here right now. So it is coming up from the bottom, and as you can see there are 3 Shikharas out here, and there are also small Shikharas like this. So the smaller Shikharas are known as Uru Shikhara, whereas the big Shikhara is known as normal Shikhara. Okay, and these Shikharas are quite different from these tall structures which you find on the Dravidian style of temples. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is that although Shikharas are the major representative element of the North Indian style of Nagara style of temples, but for South Indian style of temples you will not have this kind of a curved structure of a Shikhara. Okay, for South Indian you will have a different kind of a Shikhara, and that is not known as Shikhara, that is actually known as Vimana, and that looks like a pyramid. Okay, so this is how a Vimana would look, and that is a representative element of the South Indian Dravida style of temple. Okay, so for South Indian temples, you will find something like this. Okay, so as you can see, these are not curving inwards. Okay, so they are like straight lines which are going, and then it's flat on the top. So these are how the South Indian Vimanas are made, and all the Shikharas and the Vimanas are basically tall structures over the main deity. And the main deity, that particular place where the main deity or deity is found, and that place is known as Garbhagriha, as we have talked about in our last class as well. So the Garbhagriha is the most important place where the deity is found, whether it is Shiva, whether it is Vishnu, it doesn't matter. But that's the place where the main deity is kept, and on top of it we find the Shikhara. Okay, so this is like a structure where in between, in that particular place, you'll find the main deity, and on top of it the structural temple makers are installing this whole spire, tall spire, curvilinear in structure. Okay, so that is how it is designed. All right, so out here in between is the main deity. Then from here, as we go towards the entrance of the temple, this is the entrance of the temple, and these are the steps from which you have to climb up the temple, and then you go inside and you will see that these structures are the pillars. So you'll find a platform where there will be a lot of pillars, and that is also known as portico. Okay, the particular technical term which is used for that mandapa is a portico, or a colonnaded pillared structure. So before you reach the Garbhagriha, you will find a big platform where there will be a lot of pillars. There will be open spaces. That particular space is known as mandapa, and the reason why they have a mandapa is because people used to dance, people used to discuss, people used to celebrate and organize dramas, dances, and all these kind of cultural events inside the mandapa. Because in the Garbhagriha they will mostly be, praying or conducting rituals or running around in circles or something like that. But for the mandapa, it represents a more social part of it, where people used to come, they used to get dressed and conduct dances, dramas, and everything. All right, so that's the mandapa. Apart from that, there are also these 2 very important elements. So right on top of the Shikhara, you have 2 important elements. The first one is like a disc. So the first one is like a disc and it is known as Amalaka. Okay, so this particular structure out here, flat disc-like structure, is known as Amalaka. And the one on top, the bob on the top, it's like a bell structure, and that one is known as Kalasha. So these are the basic parts of a normal North Indian temple. Okay, so that's how you'll be figuring out a normal North Indian temple. Now that we are done with the basic structure, let's just talk about some important types of temples which are found, which belong to the North Indian style. Okay, all right. So remember, we're talking about North Indian temples. We're not talking about Dravida or the South Indian temples right now. So I have talked about the basic different parts of the temples, especially for the North Indian. For South Indian, we'll do it separately. Now the question is, now the question that we have to know is, what do we find inside the temples of North India? Well, we find three different things. Firstly, we find sculpture. So whenever they try to carve out pieces of rock and make an image out of it, that is what we known as is known as sculpture. So the whole process of carving out rock from a big piece of rock, okay, and then giving it some form of relief, high or low, and finally seeing the structure of whatever image, like a god or goddess or a yaksha or a bodhisattva, whatever you're trying to carve out of the rock, that whole process is known as sculpture. Apart from that, there is one term which is known as iconography, and iconography we study is the study of images which are found inside these structural temples. And when we talk about these temples, the kind of images that we find are, they belong to Vishnu. They might be different avatars of Vishnu, like the third avatar or the Bara, a boar avatar of Vishnu, or they might be about Shiva in the form of Nataraja, or they might be the Nandi bull. Okay, so there are different types of images which are found inside these temples, and they all are religiously based. And this study of these kind of images is known as iconography. All right. So we find sculptures, we find iconography, and also a third element which is known as ornamentation. Of course, because the kings used to give a whole lot of money for celebrating and designing these kind of temples. Imagine the king used to increase his power and prestige by building great temples. Okay, Shah Jahan increased his prestige by trying to build a great temple, by trying to build the Taj Mahal. Whereas the great kings of the Chola Empire, like Rajendra Chola, Raja Chola, these were the people who gave enormous amount of money to build the temples like the Tanjore Temple or the Brihadeshwara Temple, right? So the kings wanted to have a good reputation. They were willing to give a lot of money for these people. And because there was a lot of money coming inside the temples, and because they were also rich in resources, they could invest a lot of money for ornamentation. All right, so these are the things that we will need to know. Now, let's try to divide the North Indian temples based on how the spire, this spire that I just talked about, that goes on to the top, okay, the inward spire, which is the defining feature of the North Indian temples. Let's try to divide the North Indian temples based on how the spires are built. So we will talk about three different types. The first one is the Latina type. The second one is the Pamsana type. Pamsana. Okay, Pamsana. The Latina type is also known as Rekha Prasada. These are technical names. So this Latina is not people who belong to Latin American countries, women. No. So Latina type or the Rekha Prasada type. Okay. Then we have the Pamsana type. And the third one, very interesting one, which is also known as the Vallavi type. Okay, hunched back. Vallavi type. So three types. Okay, so we found that based on the geography, we have three types of temples: Nagara, Vesara, and Dravida. Okay, so this is very cultural, more broader in its dimension. Based on how the spires are, in what way they are constructed. So architecturally, we have three types. Those are Latina, Rekha Prasada, Pamsana, and Vallavi. Now let's just see what is the speciality about this Latina type. All right, so much hype about it. Okay, so this is the simplest one. The simplest one is the Latina type, and it is also the most common one. Okay, so this is nothing but square at the base, and the walls curve and the slopes inwards on a point at the top. So just like the diagram that I had made, so it is square at the base. The temple is square at the base. All right. And then on top of that square platform, the spire will be curving inward. Okay, so there is a very distinct inward curve that goes on inward direction as we go to the top, and then it connects at one point. That is nothing but the Latina type, which is the most common type. All right, let's see some more points about these type of temples. So the Latina types are mainly used for housing the Garbhagriha. Okay, so in our previous diagram, we can see that the tallest shikara that we built, and we said that right on bottom of that we have the sanctum sanctorum, where which is also known as the Garbhagriha, and that is a place where the deity is kept. So the Latina type of temple is usually built right on top the sanctum sanctorum. That is what these people are saying. So this is how it was built. Later on, the temples became more complex, and there was not just one spire or one shikara. They started, adding number of shikaras, because they wanted to make it more glamorous, and the more the number of shikaras you add, the more money you spend, the greater the amount of intimidation in the minds of the people. People will be more impressed. So they did that later on. But let's just come back for the next type of temple. So this is known as Phamsana. So Latina Rekhaprasada is comparatively taller than the Phamsana type. So Phamsana is slightly shorter version of the earlier one, but that's not the only difference. So it is slightly broader and shorter. Okay. So if say let's say spire for Latina type is around let's say 20 meters, then for for Phamsana type it will be around, let's say, 10 meters. Okay, so it will not even 10 meters, like around 5 to 6 meters height. That's how the spires will be built. So it is more flatter in nature, it is more broader in nature, not as tall as the Latina type. Let's see some more differences. The roof is composed of several slabs. So although I use this diagram for the Vimana of South Indian style, but even for the Phamsana style, you can say that whatever spire they are building for Phamsana, it is shorter in structure. Okay, it is shorter in structure, and it has a lot of slabs. Before you go to the top, it has a lot of slabs that you can climb and probably go to the top. Alright, so that gently rise to a single point on the roof. So even the Phamsana type is rising to a single point on the roof, but then it is rising more gently, and there are slabs. Alright, so that's important. The third one is known as the Vallavi type, and it's very interesting because it is apsidal. So in the last class we talked about how there is something known as the elephant back. So it is like a hunched back sort of a structure. So that's how the Vallavi type is. And these are rectangular buildings with a roof that rises to a vaulted chamber. Okay, so the roof is not flat. Okay, and it is also not coming to one particular point like a straight spire. Okay, so the roof is like this, like an arch, you can say. Okay, so that's how vaulted chamber. So the proper word for Vallavi is that it has a vaulted chamber roof. All right, so these are the different types of temples. These are different types of temples. Now let's talk about the different types of temples of this North Indian type of temples, which are found in different parts of India. Okay, as I have already said, that the temples are found not only on the south or the east, but also in the north. So let's try to figure out what are the places where we find the Nagara or the North Indian style of temples. Alright, so I have my own notes which I have figured for you guys, because we do not want to miss any topic out here. So let's start off with Central India. Central India, oh, nice place. So Central India, the most representative temple which was found, which represents the Nagara style, was the Dashavatara temple in Deoghar in UP. Okay, so this temple we had already talked about in Gupta period. Let's just mention some other facts about it. Dashavatara temple in Deoghar. This is in UP. Okay, so Dashavatara temple in Deoghar in UP. So this is the representative temple of the Nagara style, and you can imagine it will be having the curvilinear spires or the curvilinear shikharas. Now the most important thing about Dashavatara temple style is that there is a particular word which is used to describe these type of temples, and that word is nothing but Panchayatan. Okay, so it's not Panchayat, but it is known as Panchayatan. Now you might be wondering, what does it really mean, Panchayatan? So Panchayatan is actually the type of temple which is represented by Dashavatara temple. So it is basically, as you can see, Pancha means 5. Okay, so Panchayatan is something which is consisting of 5 elements. So we can say that, if one Shikhara is there in Latina type of temple, then for Panchayatan type of temple, there will be 5 Shikharas. 4 will be on the corners of the particular platform, and then there will be 1 at the center. Okay, so it is a more complex type of temple, and 4 spires will be installed at the 4 corners. Okay, so let's say if this is like a platform, a square or rectangular platform, then 1 spire will be here, 1 there, and then there will be 1 much taller in between. So this is how the Panchayatan style of temple is built. And the reason why we have more than 1 spire is because there will be more than 1 deities or gods which are being prayed to by the people in this kind of temple, and the one at the center will be the main one, and the one at the sides will be the supporting role ones. Alright, so that is how we'll be remembering this particular Panchayatan style of temple. Rest assured, even in UPSC prelims, maybe around 2015, they had asked this direct question. Okay, so it is important for us to know why Dashavatara temple in UP is a Panchayatan style of temple. Another interesting fact is that this is the west-facing temple. Mostly temples are east-facing temples because according to the rules of temple making from ancient Shastras, the eastern side should be facing the rising sun. Okay, the entrance of the temple should be facing the rising sun. But then for this particular temple, it's west-facing. So that is one crucial point that you have to remember. Apart from these, this particular temple was built during the Gupta time. It's from 6th century. Okay, remember the time frame as well, because they also ask this kind of questions. Let's see if there are a few more points about this particular temple. And there are 3 different types of Vishnu structures or images which are found in this Dashavatara style of temple. As you can see from this word itself, Dashavatara temple is about the 10 avatars of Vishnu, and out of the 10 they just have 3 important images which are found, and those are the Seshashayana, then the second one is Gajendra Moksha, okay, and the third one is known as Naranarayana. So these are representing different episodes from the different avatars of Vishnu. So Sheshashayana is where the Vishnu is sleeping. Okay, so Vishnu is reclining on the Sheshanaga, which is known as Ananta. Alright, so Vishnu is like relaxing, and that's how it is known as Sheshashayana. Alright, next this is on the south. Okay, this is details which will probably help you. Then Gajendra Moksha is on the west, and Gajendra Moksha is, as you can see, Gajendra is actually defines an elephant, and Moksha is how you are attaining nirvana. Okay, how you are dominating your whatever suffering that you have. So this talks about how Vishnu is actually using his spiritual power and whatever power he have to try to dominate his evil parts and try to attain moksha by defeating an elephant. Okay, so he's trying to to achieve moksha by symbolically communicating by Vishnu's suppression of an asura who had taken the form of an elephant. So there was an asura who was in the form of an elephant, and that was subdued by Vishnu, and this is the way how he attained moksha. Next, the third one, Naranayan, it talks about the discussion between the human soul and the eternal divine. Okay, so these are very spiritual concepts. We don't need to go into details of these. And this was Naranayan is on the east. Okay, so just remember these are the images which are found in the Dashavatara temple. Next, let's talk about another important group of temples which belong to the Central Indian Nagara style of temples. Yes, we're talking about the great temples, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is known as the Khajuraho temples. Okay, they are quite famous for another very interesting thing which we will talk about now. So Khajuraho. So this is in MP. So Khajuraho temples are in MP. They are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So UNESCO World Heritage Site, which means they have a special place. They are quite precious culturally for us, and we have to give our best to try to sustain and preserve them. So apart from that, the Khajuraho temples were built by the Chandelas. Okay, so the Khajuraho temple was built by the Chandela kings. Let's write it. Chandela kings were used, where the people who built the Khajuraho temple, it was built of sandstone, and so was the Dashavatara temple. These are all built of sandstone mostly, unless I otherwise mention that they were made of stones. They are mostly made of sandstone. Alright, so they were made of sandstone. And the most important thing about the Khajuraho temple is that it had some very interesting some sculptures, and those are known as mithunas. Okay, so mithunas, or these are known as erotic couples. So these type of erotic couples in various sensual positions are found in the entirety. Almost around 60 to 70% of the entire temple of Khajuraho is composed of these erotic couples, and they are in different different parts of sensual consummation, and that is very representative of the Khajuraho temples, and they are known as mithunas. And no, they do not signify just the physical connection between two human beings, but they actually try to figuratively signify the spiritual connection between a human being and the eternal divine being. Okay, so by using these mithunas, they are not trying to just talk about the physical aspect of consummation, but about how the human spirit itself will sort of spiritually combine with the eternal divine, which is controlling the entire cosmos. All right, so these are some of the basic facts of the Khajuraho temples. As you can see, they are from North Indian style of temples. These are the basic features. Apart from the Khajuraho temples, which are found here, there was also some Jain temples which are found in Khajuraho as well, and the Jain temples are known as Chosnath Yogi temple. So whenever we try to read about any particular place from a point of view of art and architecture, we need to know whether they were just focusing on Buddhist art, whether they were just focusing on Hindu art, or they were a mixture of both. For example, when we talked about Gandhara and Mathura, you remember we said that Gandhara was mostly representative of a Greco-Roman sort of Buddhist art. So it was mostly Buddhist element. Okay. On the other hand, when we're talking about Mathura, which is more indigenous in nature, we said that it does not just have Buddhist elements, but it also has some Hindu elements, or some tantric elements, or some Vaishnavite elements, right? So no, not really tantric elements, but it did have, apart from Buddhism, it also had some Hindu and some Jain elements as well. All right, so that's just an example. Okay, do not have to take it as a fact, but the point I'm trying to make is that just because Khajuraho has a lot of Hindu temples doesn't mean that it does not have any Jain influence, whereas we find that there was a particular Chosnath Yogi temple. Okay, Chaus, C-H-A-U-S, Chosnath Yogi Jain temple. Okay, T for temple. So Chosnath Yogi Jain temple was also found in the surroundings, which speak about that Jains also had a spiritual and religious place in the whole Khajuraho compound. All right. So the whole Chosnath Yogi Jain temple that we are talking about right now was responsible for tantric worship. Alright, the tantric system of beliefs, whether it is in Hindu style or it is in Buddhist philosophy, which sort of grew later on towards the 9th and 10th century, especially under the Pala kings of Bengal. That particular form of tantricity, the tantric rituals, were also found in the Chosnath Yogi Jaina temples inside the whole Khajuraho compound. All right, so these are some of the topics from Central India. Now let's just give more time to Western India as well. So quickly, let's just take a flight to West India because we want to go there quickly, or maybe go in a rocket. Okay, so West India. So what is the most interesting thing about West India? In Central India, we said the sandstone was the most commonly found stone which was used to carve out different sculptures or images or temples. Now, for Western India, remember this very clearly, there was another important stone which was used for the structures, and that particular stone is known as white marble, okay? A sign of luxury even right now in India. So, West India, the structures were built of white marble. So I'm talking about it first because this is a very significant difference between these two styles, and that could be a very impressive question. So white marble was used for the temples of Western India, and specifically we are talking about the Jain temples which are found in Western India. Okay, so we are talking about the Jain temples, for example the Dilwara temples. So Dilwara temples which are found in Mount Abu, near Mount Abu, which is in Rajasthan. Okay, it's probably around the border of Rajasthan and Gujarat. So that's not very important. Important is in West India, a particular type of Jain temples were brought up in Rajasthan near Mount Abu, and those are clearly Jain temples, and they were made of white marble. They were very subtle, very intricate, very beautiful in nature. Okay, I mean, just by me telling you, you won't be able to figure out. Look it up on Google, look up Dilwara temple and check out how amazing it was. So let's just talk a few things about the Dilwara temple once again. So just like the Hindus try to build temples in different parts of India, Jains were also building temples, and this particular temple, the Dilwara temple, was constructed by a person known as Vimal Shah. Okay, so there was a person known as Vimal Shah, and he constructed the beautiful Dilwara temple out of white marble. All right, so this is the most important thing about the West India. Apart from that, there is another very important temple from West India, and that is the Sun temple. Okay, so next we're talking about West Indian, another type of temple, that is a Sun temple. The Sun temple is important because Sun temples are found in the whole of the world. They are found in Egypt, they're found in China, they're also found in the Roman civilization, they're found in the Inca civilization, and as we can see, the reason is because sun is something which has been worshipped by everyone, because as we are from Earth, we all have to face the sun at least for 12 hours in an entire day. So people have been worshipping the great light and power of the sun since ages and in different civilizations. And out of those civilizations, India is also where we find sun temples in the memory of worship of the sun. And this particular thing became a question in the UPSC prelims paper, where they were asking, what among these options you do not find a sun temple. Now, the tricky part out here that we need to be careful about is that whenever we read about any particular type of temple, we need to just look online to see how many of these type of temples are found. For example, sun temples are not only found in Western India. Okay, so the sun temple that we are starting today's discussion right now is the one which is found in Modhera. So Modhera is in Gujarat. All right, so sun temple is not just found in Modhera. sun temples are also found in Konark, which is in Orissa. And actually, by reading just one textbook, we would be clear that, okay, there are two places, Modhera and Konark, where sun temples are found. But guys, UPSC is much clever than us, so they will ask more, and you need to know that there are also other places in India where we find sun temple. For example, there is a place known as Arasavalli, or sorry, Asaravalli, which is in Andhra Pradesh, okay, and you find sun temples there. There are places in UP where you find sun temples. There are places in Kashmir where you find sun temples, and we will talk about these places right now. But before that, let's talk about this particular sun temple of Modhera. Okay, so Modhera Sun Temple. So this was built by the Solankis. Solankis were a dynasty, okay, very popular dynasty in Western India, and they built a sun temple in Modhera. And the sun temple, the most important feature of the sun temple of Modhera is a pond. And the pond was not directly on level ground, so you had to climb through huge thousands or hundreds of steps down, and then you will find a pond where people used to, take part in ablution ceremonies or take bath or just any other ritual. But the point is, the pond was not exactly on ground level. It was, you had to go down a number of steps to finally find the pond. So it was more like you have to climb a lot of steps from all the different directions, and then you'll find a pond somewhere here. So there will be a lot of steps on the side, and these steps were all very horizontally, diagonally arranged in an intricate pattern, which was designed by the architects of the Solanki dynasty. Very impressive. And so that is what is important for the sun temple. It had a tank, okay, so the tank had a lot of steps. All right, so that tank is known as Surya Kund. So Surya is basically sun. So Surya Kund means the sun tank. And the important fact about this is that it had 108 shrines. Okay, so as I said that, you have to climb a lot of steps to get to the final pond. So the steps were designed in such a way that they used to have around 108 shrines before you can reach the real ground level, water level of the tank. Okay, so these are some of the facts of the West Indian temples. Another West Indian temple will be the Shamlaji temple. So Shamlaji temple, okay, so that's a Hindu temple. It's mostly a Vishnu plus Krishna temple. So Modhera is a sun temple. This is a Vishnu plus Krishna, which in other words it's a sun temple. But remember guys, white marble is not the only material which was used to construct temples from West India. There was another rock which was used, and that is known as the grey or black basalt. Okay, so basalt is also a type of rock, mostly basic. So grey and black basalt was also used for these type of temples. So this brings us to the end of West India. Now let's talk about the temples of East India, which is where we belong to, right? So now we're going to talk about the temples of East India. All right. So what is so special about the temples of East India? Okay, but before that, let me talk about the places where we find a sun temple, because I just mentioned that we are dealing with very clever people, and just because we know that Konark has sun temple and Modhera has a sun temple, we need to know where else probably we will get a sun temple. Okay, so apart from Konark and Modhera, there are places like Arasavalli in AP, which we just talked about. Then we have Katharmal, which is in Nainital, North India. Then we have in Tamil Nadu a place known as Kumbakonam. Then we have, even in Assam, there is something known as Surya Pahar. Okay, so Surya Pahar temple is found in Assam. Then we have also one in Ghumli in Gujarat. So this is just for your information. so that if at all you find any of those options in any of the options, any of those temples in any of your options, you can mark the right answer, right? So these are also places where you find legitimate sun temples. So that brings us to the end of Western India. Now let's talk about East India. So the important thing about East India is that the whole climate of East India is quite different. Okay, East India is a place where we find more rainfall. For example, places like Assam, because of both the streams of the monsoons which come from the west, southwestern side. So because this is a place where we have the foothills of the Himalayas, so that is the reason why we have more rainfall out here. The quantity of rainfall is more, it is more humid, and because of this particular geographical and climatic conditions, the architectures which are found in this particular region are slightly different. For example, you won't find too many rock structures, but mostly the structures are made of terracotta. So East India is famous for its terracotta structures. Alright. For example, amongst East India, let's talk about some of these structures which are found in Assam. In the last class, we talked about how Daw Parbatia was, almost belonged to the Gupta age, and how it had elements of the Gupta architecture in it, which had gates, which had sculptures. Okay, so apart from Daw Parbatia, we also find sculptures from ancient period in Assam, in a place known as Rangagora. This is in Tinsukia. Okay. So Rangagora Tea Estate, it's a tea garden. So in Tinsukia, so this is where you find the particular type of ancient Indian architecture. Okay, so the Eastern Indian architecture, you'll find it in Rangagora, you'll find it in Daw Parbatia. Then one particular style which came up in Assam during the medieval age is the combination of whatever Tibeto-Burman and the Shan style, which was brought from the east by the Ahom people, which were coming, which were an agricultural community led by the great king known as Sukafa, which is coming from the east. On the other hand, there was also the influences of the Sultanate from the west, so it became a mixture of a particular culture. Okay, so and because of that, we have a very typical type of architecture. For example, the Kamakhya temple also has a very typical North Indian Nagara style of architecture. All right, so these are the facts about Assam. Then Assam also had some Pala influence. So from the east we had Sukafa's influence, and from the west we had the Pala influence, and that sort of came together and formed the whole representative Kamakhya temple, which was rebuilt during the 17th century AD. All right, now apart from Assam, in East India we also have Bengal, and the style which came up in Bengal is known as Vanga style. Okay, so this is known as the Vanga style, and this is the Bengal style. And the good thing about the Bengal style is that it had something which is known as the Bangla roof. Okay, so the very representative, the quintessential element of the Bangla style is known as the Bangla roof. So Bangla roof is nothing but a form of a sloping roof. Okay, so as I have said, because we had more rainfall, so a flat roof structure would not be as sustainable as it would be in a less rainfall place, probably in India. But because in Eastern India we had more rainfall, so the people made sure that they had some sloping roof structures which are known as the Bangla roof or the Bangla hut. Okay, and some people say that even the word bungalow, which is the present word which we use for those kind of a structure, actually comes from the whole word Bangla roof. Okay, so this is what has been the contribution of Bengal. And remember, the Vanga style, it came up from the 9th to the 11th centuries, and it was basically led and represented by the Pala kings. Then from the 11th to the 13th centuries, Bengal was ruled by another dynasty which was known as Sena. So another style sort of came out which is known as the Sena style. Okay, so if you ask me what are the example, can you give me one example of this Vanga style which had the Bangla roof? So yes, I can, and that is the Siddheswara Mahadeva temple. So Siddheswara Mahadeva temple, which is famous for the Bengali hut or the sloping roof or the Bangla roof. So as an example, if you were asked an example of the Vanga style with the Bangla roof, you would say that the Siddheswara Mahadeva Shiva temple is a very representative element of this sloping roof structure. Okay, and later on, this particular sloping roof Bangla style of architecture was also used by the Mughal emperors and also the sultanates while they were constructing their architectural things in North India, especially in and around Delhi, right? So that brings us to the end of Eastern India. Oh, well, how can we forget about Orissa? So I'm so sorry. So let's talk about Orissa, because we've done with Bengal, we've done with Assam, we've done with the Northeast. Now let's talk about Orissa. And Orissa has some really, really interesting architectural structures. Yes, we are still talking about Eastern India. And just a few moments back, we had talked about the Sun Temple of Konark. So in Orissa, there was a particular different type of the whole shikhara, the shikhara that we have been talking about, the curvilinear structure. So the one that we find in Orissa is quite different, not very different, but then it does have some distinguishing features, including the name, and the name which is used for the spires of Orissa, the tall curvilinear structures, is known as Deul. Okay, now this is very similar to what we find in Assam as well, Dol or Deul. So if we see the Shiva temples in Sivsagar, Devidol, Shivadol, you will see that the word Dol is used or Deul is used for Assam as well. But then if you ask me, what is the difference between a curvilinear structure like a shikhara and a Deul? Well, the difference is that for the Deul, the whole geometry it will go straight for a very long period of time, and then right at the top it will become inward and join at one place. Okay, so the difference between tall spires and shikharas and Deul, which is also a shikhara, is that for a Deul it just goes up without being too curvilinear to a very far point, and then suddenly it will become curvilinear in nature. Okay, so this top part is more curvilinear in nature for a Deul, whereas for the tall spires or the shikhara, it becomes curvilinear from the bottom itself. So it is a more symmetrical structure. It is more it is distributed in a more symmetrical manner. It starts inwardly curving from the bottom itself. But for this Deul, which is found in Orissa, very specific type, it goes straight for a very long period of time, almost straight, maybe slight curve, and then right on top it will go towards the joining point. Okay, and that is what we know as Deul. Isn't it very interesting? Okay, so what are the temples that we find in Orissa? One is definitely the Sun Temple of Konark. So Konark Sun Temple. Okay, so the Konark Sun Temple was constructed by this person known as Narsingh Deva. So Narsingh Deva was the person who constructed the Konark Sun Temple, and these people belong to the Eastern Ganga dynasty. Alright, so the Konark Temple was built by Narsingh Deva, who belonged to the Eastern Ganga dynasty, and it is also known as Black Pagoda. Okay, so Black Pagoda is like a religious temple, especially for the Buddhists, okay, of Southeast Asia and China and all. So Black Pagoda is the nickname of Konark Temple, and there is also something known as White Pagoda. Okay, so if there is black, there needs to be white. So there is something known as White Pagoda, and the temple at Jagannath Puri, the Jagannath Temple, that's the temple which has been nicknamed as the White Pagoda. Okay, so these are the facts that I have specifically found out for you guys, so that you have more facts for both, especially your UPSC examinations. So Black Pagoda, because the whole walls and structures of the Konark Temple has been becoming black over the years, so that is known as Black Pagoda. And White Pagoda is for the Jagannath Temple, which is in Puri. Okay, which is in Puri, it's right beside a beach, and the Konark Sun Temple is in Konark. All right, so these are the important things. So the annual the Ratha festival, which we find huge number of people celebrating the White Pagoda, is actually held in the Jagannath Temple in Puri. The annual, the whole Ratha festival, the chariot festival. All right. So these are some of the things which we need to know about the Eastern Indian temples. Now let's talk about very briefly the temples which are found in the hills, because of course we cannot ignore the hills. So the hills have a typical element of their own. Yes, we're talking about Kashmir. So yes, we're talking about the hilly region, especially North India, including the whole region of Kashmir. So if you know the geography, you would find that the whole hilly region of northern India. So if my face is the hilly region of northern India, then towards towards the northwest, you'll find Afghanistan, Hindu Kush, Suleiman Range, Bactria, and all those Central Asian places. And if I'm the north, if my face is representing the Himalayas, okay, Kashmir, then towards the south and southeast, you will find UP, you will find places like Mathura, okay, and Gandhara is somewhere to my northwest, to your northwest of my face. Okay, so here is Gandhara, here is Mathura, and in between I have Jammu and Kashmir, somewhere in Kashmir, which is the hilly part. Okay, now don't you really think that these two places will have some amount of influence on whatever art and architecture which will be developing in my face, not in my face, but in Jammu and Kashmir or the whole hilly region? Yes, that is exactly what happened. So the point I'm trying to make is that there are temples in Kashmir which had influence of the Greek Gandharic Buddhist elements. Plus, it also had the Hindu elements, okay, Hindu elements of Mathura school. Plus, it had the Gupta elements, because Gupta was also on the southern side. So it was also influencing whatever art was coming up in that. It also had post-Gupta influences. Okay, now these are some of the things from the hills. So it did have a huge number of influences of places from both the sides of the boundary. And if you ask me one example of this kind of temple, well, it is the Pandrethan temple. So it is also known as, it is found in Kashmir. So Pandrethan temple, it is also known as Pani Mandir. Okay. So because of some reason, it is also known as Pani Mandir. On other words, it is known as the Pandrethan Vishnu Temple. So it's a Hindu temple. You can see I said Hindu influence is also there. Buddhist influence is also there. Buddhist influence is mostly found in the structures of the images and the materials which was used. So these are some of the things, and because it was built in a hilly place, instead of rocks, they were also using a lot of wooden structures. So wood structures were also used instead of rocks for temples which are found in the hilly regions. Alright, so that brings us to the end of the North Indian style of temples which are found in different parts of India. Okay, now just by talking about the North Indian style of temples, we cannot stop our class. We have to talk about the South Indian style of temples as well.